Hello and welcome back to the Gubba podcast. I'm Gubba, a first-time homesteader following in the footsteps of my homesteading forebears. And in this podcast, I discuss prepping, homesteading, and everything in between. And today I'm going to be discussing a super fun topic, dairy cows and goats, and which one is best for you. I will go over the pros and cons of each one as I just went through this learning process myself, and I decided on one, but I'm not going to tell you what one until later in this episode, so you can make your guess as I go through the differences. Starting with a dairy cow, who doesn't love cows? They're so stinking cute, so that's definitely a plus, but goats are cute too, so we're really tied there. But for dairy cows, I learned that there are quite a few varieties to choose from. You have Holstein, which is the traditional commercial dairy cow because they produce so much milk, so that's like your black and white spotted cow, and then you have brown Swiss, which are known for cheese making, a Jersey, which is the traditional homestead dairy cow and produces A2 milk, a Guernsey, which is very similar to a Jersey, a Highlander, which is a dual purpose breed, so you can raise it for meat and milk. And over the course of deciding what kind of dairy animal is right for me, I dove into the different breeds and learned a lot about them. So it's neat to see how different breeds do different things, and you can definitely have choices when you decide you want a dairy cow. And it's the same thing for goats. There's different kinds of goats, like a Nubian goat for dairy. Kinder goats are dual purpose, Nigerian dwarf goats. So there's a variety when it comes to both. And one great thing about raw cow milk is that it isn't homogenized, meaning the milk and cream separate. And this is a major positive, a pro, because you can easily separate the cream and make butter or ice cream or whatever your heart dreams of with that cream. And with the raw cow's milk that I purchase, I always get a beautiful cream line. There's like 3 inches of cream at the top of my milk. Oh man, it's beautiful. And definitely a plus as compared to goat's milk, because goat's milk is naturally homogenized, so the milk and cream are together, which is a big con. I mean, at least for me, I want that cream to make some butter. And if you want to separate goat's milk from cream, you either need to gather a lot of milk for a little bit of cream or purchase a separator, which can be expensive. And this may be an issue for you, maybe not, but getting a separator and dealing with all that seems kind of like a hassle, but I don't know. I don't have goats yet. But one advantage goats have over cows is that they are easier to transport. So throw them in the back of your car or the back of your truck and boom, you're on your way. A cow needs a trailer, so transporting is more challenging. And if you're like me, I don't have a cow trailer, so that is something I would have to hunt down to borrow from a neighbor or invest in, and that's a big investment. Those things are pretty spendy, and I can't just put a cow in the back of my car. And transport will be important for when you breed your dairy animal. You can't have milk without them having a baby, so you need to figure out your plan for that. There are places that offer you to bring your animals to pasture with their male counterparts in their fields, and you just hope that they get pregnant. Or there is artificial insemination where somebody comes out and artificially inseminates your animal, and this has less of a chance of working compared to the pasture method. You could also get the male counterpart, so like a male goat or a bull, and bring to your homestead so you never have to pay for somebody to help you get your animal pregnant, but you do have to pay for the feed and cost of living for that animal. And this method is a con, I feel, for both goats and some dairy cows. Male goats get incredibly stinky. So every goat owner I spoke with said that male goats have a horrendous stench to them. They're super smelly, and you don't want them anywhere near the house. That seems so odd, but that's just a characteristic, and maybe there are less smellier male goats. I don't know. But having a male bull cow or just a bull cow can also be a con because some bulls are mean. And I've heard and read horror stories about Jersey bulls and how they charge and rip through fencing and rip off gates and are just not friendly at all. And honestly, that sounds kind of terrifying. So having a large animal like that could be dangerous, especially with kiddos. So that's something you have to consider. And having your own self-sufficient herd of either goats or dairy cows could be difficult, but I think goats would be more manageable. And I would rather have the smell of a stinky goat than be charged by a big bull. So that would depend on your area, what kind of field you have. There's just so many things that would go into actually having a self-sufficient herd. And I'm definitely not there yet, but I know a lot of people are, and I think that's neat. And another thing to consider for these animals is the cleanliness. Cows will go to the bathroom while you're milking them. I have experienced this firsthand actually while milking my neighbor's Jersey. They taught me to milk. It was really cool. And they don't care that you're milking. They gotta go. Whereas goats will not go to the bathroom typically while you're milking. And if they did, their poo is easier to clean up than a cow's as they're little pellets, and a cow is definitely like a big pile of smelly, mushy pudding that's nasty, but you can use it as fertilizer later on. Anyways, you can't just scoop it out as easily as a goat's. Cows will also lay in their poo as it's warm, whereas goats like to stay clean. They're both hardy animals, with the cow probably being a little more hardy and able to withstand more weather ailments, but both can survive a winter with some provided shelter. All the goat owners that I talked to said that whenever it started raining, all their goats were inside the shelter. They didn't like to get wet, and you don't need to have any extravagant shelters for them. Just like a 3-sided shed would be great to cover them from the wind and overhead, from rain or snow, just something that they can escape from the different elements if they want to, need to. And goats definitely win in the cleanliness department. I feel like that's a pro that they stay clean, especially if you're going to be like out milking and in that environment. I love that they're able to keep more clean than cows. But for containment, cows are definitely easier to contain. This was something I looked into heavily because I would have to prepare for either animal on my homestead, but how much work would depend on the animal. So goats are escape artists, so you need to build a proper fencing enclosure with electric netting, fencing, or no climb fencing. Their horns can get stuck in different types of fencing, so you have to be careful with what you use because you don't want them to get caught and die. Oh my gosh, that would be so sad. Cows are definitely easier to enclose. One string of hot fence and you're good. Like, they get it. They are like, nope, I don't want anything to do with that hot fence. I'm staying away. Calves are a bit different as they like to get out, so you'll need more than just a string of hot fence, but nothing as elaborate as you would need for goats. And I've experienced this firsthand with the cows. There's some like steers in the back of my property right now from another farmer. And so they're like the teenage bulls, right? And so they will test the fence, but once they like see the boundary, they're good. They haven't gotten out in a while. And I talked to one goat farmer and she said she didn't have her fencing secured and the goats got out and ate all of her trees. That would be such a bummer. I have a lot of trees. I'd be so sad, especially a lot of baby trees. If the goats got out and just chowed down on my trees, no thank you. And when people think of goats, they think of them eating grass, like great grass eaters. But actually, goats are pickier eaters and prefer more burly items like weeds and things like trees. Whereas cows are more of the lawnmower and eat that beautiful sun-kissed grass. You put them out to pasture, literally, and they just chow down on all the grass. So this could be a positive or a negative for you, depending on where you live, what kind of land you have, what kind of vegetation is growing. Maybe you don't have pasture, but you live in a wooded area with bushes and trees. Like, goats would love that. And another goat owner that I talked to, she said that the goats would just like eat patches of grass. Like, they didn't really care for the pasture. They just wanted to get to the bushes. And for feeding, cows are a bigger animal. So require more feed, but they also produce a ton of milk. You will be swimming in milk. And with goats, I can't say that you will be swimming in milk. Feed costs will depend on where you live and what kind of area you have to house your animals. So for example, I have a lot of pastures, so cows wouldn't need any supplemental feeding spring through fall, which would save me on feed. That would be a similar case if I lived in a wooded, bushy area for goats, but I don't really. And you can make either one work though. So I do have a lot of trees, but they're not, I don't want the goats to go and graze on my trees and bushes. And for maintenance, you will have to treat your goats regularly for worms. And for cows, you don't. That is something to consider for health maintenance. Each of them have different health concerns, like mastitis is an issue prominent among dairy cows where the milk doesn't get completely emptied from the udder and they get an infection, whereas goats don't deal with that as much. They can, but it is more prominent among cows. And you will want to find a vet in your area that is knowledgeable on whatever animal you decide to get. So you can have somebody you can call if there's ever an emergency. And you will want to have clean areas for either your cow or goat to be in. If you plan to drink or sell the milk from either, you don't want to have a dirty environment to be gathering the milk from. Both cows and goats love to have companions. The golden rule is ideally to get two at a time so they don't have to be lonely. And there's a quote where it's like, a lonely goat is a loud goat, where they scream and do all that sort of thing. And dairy cows are more expensive than dairy goats, so it may be more difficult to get your cow a companion than it would be to get your goat a companion. A dairy cow will run you anywhere from about $1,000 to $3,000 on up, depending on the cow, age, health, and other factors, whereas dairy goats run $100 to $400 depending on similar factors. So you can see that it is definitely more difficult to get a companion for your dairy cow right off the bat than it would be to get a companion for your goats. And I mean, in general, it may be more difficult to get a dairy cow due to the expense than get a pair of goats. You could get multiple goats for the pair of one dairy cow, so that's something to consider. And I would suggest when you are purchasing an animal to get one that is registered and the owner kept track of its health and has a chart of some sort. I called around to a lot of different dairy cow and goat places and people and learned some people are just selling off their backyard herd and don't have any information besides the animal's cute and they give a lot of milk, and other people have spreadsheets with dates of every event in the animal's life. And I would suggest going with the latter, so getting that chart of the animal's life, because it will give you a better idea as to the kind of care they received. And I'm sure some backyard herds are okay sometimes, but I never felt completely comfortable with it. Maybe because I'm new to the game and wouldn't know what to look for when it comes to the health of an animal. With my dairy animal, I chose a farm that had spreadsheets and a plethora of information on the specific one I was getting. And get to know the people who sell the animals in your area, because they can become a wealth of knowledge for you. The farmer that I get my meat from raises goats, so I was able to pester them with a lot of questions last time I was there at their farm, and they were happy to share their knowledge with me and show me around and the structures that they use for their goats and the feed, and it was really cool. And if this isn't possible for you, I would suggest consuming a lot of YouTube content surrounding the animals so you can see what they are like and what you'd be getting yourself into. And both animals will be a huge commitment, and a big factor to consider is that these animals will require your time daily. When you are milking them, they need to be milked twice a day while they are in milk, and that's like 10 months out of the year, 7 to 10 months. And if they don't get milked, they can develop infections, and it is your responsibility to do the best you can to make sure that that does not happen. And if you can't milk, you need to find someone who can. Preferably you milk twice a day, 12 hours apart, and keep them on a schedule. And if you can't find somebody to milk for you, like, you have to do it. You have to care for that animal. So you won't be taking as many vacations, which is okay with me because I don't really care to travel travel anyways. And with all of this considered, what animal do you think best fits you in your lifestyle? So thinking over the containment and the milk and the care, like what do you think works best for you? And after considering all these pros and cons for myself, I went with, drumroll please, a dairy cow. I genuinely flip-flopped back and forth between goats and cows, but I landed on a cow because of the cream. I really want to make butter and other things with the cream, and goat milk is extremely healthy, but I truly desired the cream, like the inch cream lines. Like I love that. Plus, I would have to do a lot to get an enclosure ready for goats, and I wasn't ready for that project. I have some fencing that will do for a cow, but I will have to enforce it before the calf comes. So I found a Jersey dairy cow who is due to birth in September, and I'm excited with everything surrounding the cow. And there is a learning curve, a huge learning curve. So I will be going through that in another episode down the line of everything I've learned and continue to learn with a dairy cow. And fun fact, she's actually arriving today. And I'm unsure what I will do with the calf yet. If it's a girl, I could keep it and have another dairy cow and a companion to its mama. If it's a male, I could sell it or raise it for beef. The Jersey mom was bred to an Angus bull, and Angus are meat cows. So the baby will be a dual purpose cow for meat and milk. Of course, I get so attached to animals that I will probably be starting a massive herd. Hope not, but really, who knows? So thank you so much for listening. I hope I helped you learn more about the difference between dairy goats and dairy cows. You can follow along with me on my website, gubbahomestead.com, or my vlog journey on YouTube. You best believe I'll be sharing this journey, and I hope that you have the most beautiful day. Bye.